I didn't bring myself up in time. Welcome to another ORG podcast. Actually, this is two in a row, so I'm on a good streak right now. But I want to take care of some housekeeping before we bring in the guest. But before I do that, let's see. Let me see if I add this. Let me do this right. Here we go. Uh, the conference has been announced. It is ready. It is the largest orthodontic lab conference, I'm going to say, in the world, until someone disproves me that there's a larger orthodontic lab specific conference out there. But this is the largest one. And if you go to our site, orthodonticresource.com, you can get access to it. If you click here on this picture of all of us that were there last year, this is the portal, and you can look at the speakers. You can find out where the conference is at. So there's speakers. We got, Lance Dawdle, Josh Dobson, Brandon Farley, Christian Sarman of Neo, Michael Wright of ODL, Megan Martin of Perfect Finish. And then you could look at the agenda. And you can see the agenda. So we're constantly adding more. So we got Mara, we got even wire bending 101. So bring your technicians, all that good stuff. How to automate your lab, which is going to be very interesting, and unscience your lab marketing with Josh Dobson. Anyway, check that out. You can register. The link to I need to go to registration. If you click on the registration page, there's something I need to tell everybody. Right here is the link to the group rate. So you can get the hotel is usually like $220 a night. You can get it for $145 with our group rate if you click that link. So go ahead and get your hotel, schedule your flight, and you can register down here. Members, if you get $100 off. If you're a member of the ORG, you get $100 off. If you click here, there's a secret link with the discount already applied in your authorization tab in your member profile. So if you log into your member profile, you'll see it there. General admission, if you're not an ORG member, which you should be, you can click here and it will take you to the registration page, and you can do that. Now, that being said, I bring this up because our guest is Drew, and I have actually met him at the conference. Let me pull him up. Drew, hello.
Hey guys, how's it going?
How are y'all? Drew is has the I won't say Ferrari. Ferarro,
Yeah.
Ferarro. Okay, I like it. Okay. Orthodontic lab in Canada, in Ontario. And so he's been coming for 3 or 4 years.
Yeah, I've been there 3 times. I came in the last time before COVID, and then I believe it was shut down for two years.
Yes, yeah,
Maybe
it was
3.
shut down for 2 years. Yeah.
And then I've been the past 2 years. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So you've been a dedicated attendee there, going there, and that's been great. And I wanted to introduce it as I should have named this episode "Small World" because I through my YouTube channel, Retainer Designer, all those that are out there watching, hello. If I got to talking with a guy named George who's in Winnipeg, Canada, and we got to talking. I go, I know one guy in Canada owns an ortho lab, and his name's Drew. And George was like, I know that guy. And so that got us emailing back and forth. And you emailed me and said, hey, and I was like, hey, come on the podcast. I want to talk about that, because George had registration questions about Canada, and that's totally different than how we do it in the States. And I definitely want to talk about that.
Yep. So George and I met actually at Great Lakes. We were down at a course together. I was going there for a while because Toronto is not far from Buffalo. So I crossed about, 2.5 hour drive. Just so happens George was there that day taking a course too. We just shared information and said, if you ever, need anything, give me a shout. So he actually reached out and said that he talked to Cade. And I'm like, oh yeah, what a small world. I knew Cade. So yeah, it was crazy. It's just one of those like needle in a haystack things, it's like, just very funny, very strange. Yeah.
Yeah. And he's originally from Serbia, I believe.
Yeah. Serbian guy I believe he's been living in Winnipeg for about 11 years or so.
Yeah.
And he just had a baby. I just found out last night, actually.
I didn't know that.
I reached out to him about today, and he's like, oh yeah. And he's talking about his, new baby. Yeah.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
hopefully it'll come down in April.
Yeah, he runs a very what it sounds like a very busy in-house lab.
Yeah.
He's like, and that's what he wanted to talk to me about was, he was like in a little closet and he's got all these cases that he's working on. And I was like, man, it the ortho lab industry is alive and thriving in Canada for sure.
Yeah.
But what to answer his, what does it take to
Okay,
open a
so
lab?
I live in Ontario, near Toronto. My lab is actually in Newmarket. I always say Toronto when I'm traveling because no one would know what Newmarket is. So it's about 45 minutes northeast of Toronto. I live in a town called Uxbridge, which is again about 20 minutes from my lab. But again, I always use the term Toronto when I'm traveling because everyone can relate there.
Right.
George is from Winnipeg, which is the next province over from me, basically
Mm-hmm.
the other side of Lake Superior if you're looking at the Great Lakes.
Oh, okay.
So he lives there. So it's pretty far away. The fact that we met and knew you once, like it's pretty small
Yeah.
worldish.
Yeah.
So in Manitoba, I don't believe is regulated. So he can work there in an in-house lab without having a license. Ontario is a completely different story.
Oh.
We are completely regulated. And in order to own and run a lab, you have to be what is called an RDT, which is a registered dental technologist, similar to your CDT down there.
Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, you cannot own a lab, or you can own a lab, sorry, but you can't run a lab or supervise a lab without the license. So,
So
yeah,
that's a
go
lot
ahead.
like down here with Texas.
Yeah.
Each state province is got their own rules, and so yeah, Texas you can't open a lab unless you have a CDT on staff 30 hours a
Right.
week.
Okay. Yeah.
So it's
So
the same.
similar here. But our license is a little bit different than the CDT, I believe. In order to be an RDT, you have to go to school. So I had to do 4 years of college, and then I had to do a year in the field, and then I was able to take an exam to become an RDT. But you don't specialize in your field until you're done. So for me to take the college course, I had to take implantology, dentures, obviously orthodontics, crown and bridge. We had to do ceramics, partial dentures. So when I was done school, I had to sit out for a year accumulating hours. I literally had to get because I was in the ortho lab industry prior to, which we'll get into in a bit.
Yeah.
But I had to go work at another lab part-time to gain experience in all the other aspects because in order to get your license, the examination process it's a 5-day exam with 6 projects, encompassing
Wow.
all the things I just mentioned, and you have to pass all of them. If you don't pass them all, you're not licensed.
So
So yeah, go ahead.
even ceramics and implantology and all, like 5 days of
Yeah,
testing on that. Ooh, that
yeah.
is
It's
respect
basically
to the
like
RDT.
basically like a week in the lab. It's basically they want you to show your competence of how to work in a lab. So they give you like a basically 9 to 5 day, and they give you 6 projects. They all have to be complete by the end of the 5th day, the Friday, and you have to pass all of them. If you don't pass them all, you got to come back the next year. If you
Oh my.
pass 3 of the 5, you only have to take the 2 again that you failed. But if you fail more than like 3 of the 5, then you have to start it from scratch.
Oh my. Whew,
Yeah.
that is
And before
rough.
that, there's a written examination too that you have to pass as well before you can get to the practical part.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
So is it all always in one location?
yeah. So
Uh
it was always based out of the UFT, University of Toronto dental program, where the dentists and orthodontists actually go to school. They have labs there. They're kind of archaic and old. At least they were when I went through it. They might be a little more updated now. But yeah, it was quite a process. Very kind of nerve wracking.
Man, that and I thought the CDT was hard. And
Yeah. So
just
your
for
CDT, if I'm not mistaken, you're allowed to like take your CDT in ortho only. Is that correct?
sort of.
Or
So
dentures, or yeah,
we have 2 written tests and a practical hands-on.
yeah,
And one of the written tests covers the entirety of the ortho dental lab. So it'll have questions about dentures and crown and bridge, but mainly like tooth anatomy and stuff like that. So that's the
yeah.
written exam covers the entirety, and then you take one specialty exam, and that's when you choose your specialty. So mine was an ortho. So then your written exam is going to be like 90 questions about an ortho lab, and then your practical is 5 hours, and you got to make 5 appliances start to finish in
Right.
5 hours.
Mhm.
And it used to you have to go to a lab. Usually it's I took mine at a military lab, uh, and but some labs open up their labs and bring in the students, and you know some are up to date and some are not. And I remember I brought a toolbox with a big lathe strapped onto the top because I didn't
Yeah.
know what they had in my own handpiece and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But yeah, the RDT, that is the pass fail rate, like, is it?
It's very, very rare to pass it your first shot.
Oh,
Yeah,
oh my God.
I did, but I was under quite a lot of pressure and I worked hard at it. Some people don't take it as serious they should either. Like you get your being an ortho guy sort of before I knew that I had to really like work hard to pass all the other exams because I didn't necessarily have the practical
Right.
experience. That's why I went and worked in a full service lab for a while, and they were kind enough to let me work through the departments, which was great. But yes, there's a lot of like ceramists out there that think they're just the best, right? And they think, I can pass everything. And so they don't necessarily practice the other parts of the examination. So they tend to be the ones that fail a bit. It's because they just don't take it serious enough. They just assume oh yeah, I can pass. I'm the best ceramist in the world. So yeah, a lot of
Well,
that
that
goes on. Yeah.
that that kind of goes along with the CDT a little bit. Those that work in an ortho lab only struggle to pass that first written exam that
Right.
talks about all of them.
Yeah.
But then those that went to lab school like I did, and they have all that knowledge of, they can pass that first exam no problem, and
Yeah.
even the specialty exam. But the hands on, they're so slow. Because you only have 5 hours to make it. You're so slow. People who go to lab school struggle with passing the hands on because you're not fast yet,
Yeah.
until you've.
Yeah, and
Well,
like the fact that they put that time restraint on you, like 5 projects, 5 hours. That's like that's life in a lab. You have to be able to do that, right?
yeah,
So yeah.
and it's pretty basic for us, ortho. It's like a Holly, uh, with different clasp on it and a lower Schwartz, and
Mhm.
a lingual arch with a soldered arm, and I think mine I had to provide a set of study models too.
Oh
and we
yeah.
and we don't I don't know if they have to do that anymore, but we did get a question online from Jeff Haywood. What appliances did you make? And I assume he's talking about
The exam?
in your, yeah, on the exam, what types of appliance, like a
Okay.
crown and a denture and.
Yeah. So certain parts of it you can't do everything. So the ortho project was just like you mentioned. It's actually a Schwartz, but they try and get everything involved in that part of ortho, like little bit. So you have to do the solder joints. So it's a soldered back Holly. They want to make sure you have your stuff. Now it's mostly stuff laser welded and stuff anyway, but
Right.
you have to do two omega loop springs and making sure that the active arm was like gingival. If it's a critical fail, if you have it the wrong way around,
Oh
you have to
my.
do. They
Oh
want you to place the screw on all the acrylic work or the bite pads. So it's basically all that appliance is kind of all encompassing.
yeah.
Um, for the dentures, you have to wax up a set of actual bite blocks, like, and then you have to send it to the invigilator, the examiner. They got to approve it, set your bite, and then you have to do a full balanced waxed up denture. You
Oh
don't
wow.
have to process it, but it's got to be fully balanced, and it's got to be festooned and look nice. The crown and bridge aspect, there's two parts. You have to do two PFM crowns, and sometimes it's a central and a posterior. Mine was two centrals, so you had to match shade. That was a little tough for me. I got it. They weren't the best looking, but I managed to nail it. And the partial part, you have to create a refractory model, and then you have to do a full wax up. Again, we don't cast it, but you have to do the proper wax up, and then
Right.
you're graded on that. And then you have to do the crown and bridge component is a bridge with an attachment. So you have to drop an attachment in there. So you're casting two separate components. And then
then
you
they
have to,
gotta
the one side of the
interact.
bridge is beaded and prepared for like a composite.
Okay.
Yeah, you don't have to place the composite though. But yeah.
Oh wow. So you're pretty much what we would call a master CDT, almost like,
I guess, but I didn't. Once I finished and once I was licensed, I went strictly into ortho. So
that's
for me to step
amazing.
in one of those labs now, I'd be, I'd have the theory and everything, but
Well,
it'd be tough.
same thing with me because I went to lab school. We learned all that stuff.
Yeah,
Well, the first year you do everything, and then you specialize your second year.
yeah,
But yeah, I know how a denture is made, but ask me to wax up a level bite of it, and
yeah,
I'll be there forever.
yeah.
But yeah,
And the
that's pretty.
technology's changed so much since I went through too. Like you don't just pour a denture anymore. It's all pressed and it's all now they're printing. I'm like they're being.
Yeah.
But I have a denturist not too far from me. We're friends with, so he's just gone through the whole process of getting printers and he's starting to print. I've been printing in my lab since the beginning of printing, basically just models. Now it's changing a lot more, but yeah, the denturists are all going on full bore now to get involved with the printing.
Now, is your denturist the same as the denturist we have in the States that can work on patients?
Yeah, yeah,
They're okay. So y'all have that up probably in your province only. I'm sure it's different.
yeah, yeah. So yeah, like they're the same. Like they're regulated in Ontario. I'm not sure how it is in Winnipeg. I know Alberta is another province. They're regulated, so they have a similar license to us. And BC is as well. Some of the other provinces, I'm not so sure. I don't think so. Yeah.
That is so much a lot like the states.
Mhm.
And here's Jeff again. He says, "Thanks. Going on 47 years, I've never taken a single test or exam. Started making appliances at 17, still going."
Yeah.
So see, he's probably from a different state
Yeah.
than Texas or Florida or now Washington. They just passed laws,
Yeah.
and so you get different reactions of
Yeah.
people that they're like, I don't need a CDT, to prove my skills.
Yeah.
But my argument is, listen, if you're an RDT, you know what the hell you're doing. You've proved it.
Yeah.
Or same thing with a CDT. You can prove it. Doctor doesn't know you from a hole in the wall.
Yeah.
That's a weird expression. You don't know you from somebody else, but
Yeah.
you can say, hey, I was able to pass this CDT basic minimal. I know what I'm doing. I can at least make 5 appliances in 5 hours.
Yeah. The
Then
other part
so
about being regulated, though, it's got its ups and downs because we're heavily governed by what they call the CDTO. So it's called the College of Dental Technologists of Ontario. And
oh
it falls under the same umbrella as the dentists and the orthodontists, the doctors, dental hygienists. So it's a college. They govern you. I have to pay them every year. I think that's what they like the most.
yeah,
Um,
yep.
but their mandate is to protect the public. So anything I sell to a dentist, if there's anything that is I don't know, neglectful, that can come back on me. So I have to. They make me have liability insurance. So like
Oh,
technically, if one of my appliances does something like
like malpractice
negligent, I
insurance.
can be sued. Yeah. So we have an association as well called the Association of Dental Technologists who work on our side against the CDTO if needed. So yeah, I pay
Oh,
into 2 associations. So we're, like I
oh my
said,
god.
we're pretty heavily governed here, and so yeah, it's good and bad. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, again, the whole gist of it all was, for the patient,
Yeah. Yeah.
and that's what I like to tell about people in Texas, because a Texas dentist is not allowed to knowingly send a case to an unregistered lab, and they put that rule in there because to take your CDT you need 5 years of lab experience. To pass it, you need about 10. And so having a CDT on staff, like an RDT, somebody has at least a decade of experience
Yeah. Yeah. And
with
it,
lab
it,
work.
it takes the liability off them.
Yeah.
Before the CDTO, it was called something called the Governing Board of Dental Technicians, but they fell under the same umbrella as the RCDS, which is the Royal College of Dental Surgeons. So basically, the dental surgeons were like controlling the governing board. So we
Oh
got out of
wow.
that umbrella. Now we're governed by ourselves, self-regulated. It's called. Yeah. But I think the
Oh.
dentists and orthodontists prefer that because, like you said just a minute ago, they have to send their cases to a certified lab. Like they can't. It's illegal to unless they have an in-house. They're still allowed to have in-house, but they can't send out to a non-registered they're called illegal labs, and they do try and hunt them down and stop them. They exist, but they
they exist here too. Yeah,
yeah
yeah, and they're hard to find
yeah
because they're in the back alleys and things like that. And when they're not registered, there's not much they can do to them. I think there's like a felony or misdemeanor, when they do find them. Jeff's saying he could be grandfathered in. In some cases, they have that written into some of the laws here, of being grandfathered in. I know when they launched the, so we're under the Texas dental examiner. So we're under the dentist. When they launched that rule in 1987, they actually brought any lab that was registered before then didn't have to comply with the CDT, but they had to get continuing education. So
yeah.
I assume you have to get continuing education too.
That's another big one that I should touch on that. One of the reasons I come down to the ORG actually, it's not because it's actually a really good event, and I'll speak on that again later, because we tried to form our own club up here, and it fizzled out. A lot of the members were a bit older, and trying to get some of the younger guys in, it's like, what I like about the ORG is it draws people in from all over the country, whereas you're not necessarily competitors, right? But that's changing a little bit with digital stuff, because you can send cases wherever you want, but you still don't. Right. Most doctors still send local, regardless if they're doing digitally. But a lot of this people in our club were fairly local, and the younger guys tended to think it's kind of competition, so they didn't really want to be part of it, which is bad, because I used to speak at it quite often, and but it's unfortunate. But when I found out about the Orthodontic Resource Group, I thought it was a fantastic idea to come down, and like you mentioned off the top, you're going to call it the largest orthodontic conference, technician conference, until someone else corrects you. But I think you might be right. Like, I've never seen it before like that. So it was pretty awesome.
Yeah. Usually you go to these dental lab conferences, and there's maybe one ortho class or one, and we have 2 full days of pure ortho lab. And then you get go ahead.
Yeah. Our conference is up here. I'll get the Con Ed part. I'll get to it right after this. They tend to be just like the DLAT one that you guys share with.
Yeah.
It's full service. Most of the conferences I go to up here are that. Like, there's not ortho components to it. That's why we tried our own club to get our own, we were all sharing ideas, but again, it fizzled out. But the Con Ed up here, I'm not sure it works for CDTs. Every 3 years, we have to submit our portfolio of what we've done for the 3 years, and we are obligated to accumulate 90 points. So each course or article I read is worth a certain amount of points. It typically breaks down to, like, for every hour you get about 3 points, but you have to prove, it's a lot of paperwork. You have to prove that you went to these things. You have to take notes. So
so even those slips that we provide, that's what you would use to turn in.
Yep. And they, at my first time down, I was a little curious if my CDTO would accept something from Texas. And they totally did. It was not a problem whatsoever.
Okay.
Because they can also audit you if they want, and if they don't think that you're telling the truth, and then that's even more paperwork. So but no, everything for the ORG. If there's any Canadians out there thinking about coming down and they are regulated and they have to submit, the ORG, I was fully accepted. My college accepted it, and it was totally fine. Yeah.
Yeah, our hours are done by the National Board of Certification, and they're the ones that are over the CDT.
Yeah.
And so actually in the Texas State Dental Practice Act, it actually says dentist, you can get your CDTs from this place, this place, this place, Dental Lab Association of Texas, this place. It actually lists us as, because we get our CDTs from, it's actually in Florida, which actually, you'll be coming from Florida to the conference. You mentioned your daughter's
rugby tournament. Yeah.
Rugby tournament. That is so cool.
It's actually, I don't know about down in the States. It's becoming very, very, very popular up here, rugby. It's really taking off, especially with the girls. I don't know what it is. Everyone, I don't know what stereotypical in the States what Canadians are thought of, but I think they think everyone plays hockey. It's not necessarily the case, not anymore anyway, because we're becoming a lot more multicultural, first off, and the pure expense of hockey, it's ridiculous, and a lot of families are just coming to terms with, go rugby or soccer, and we got a lot of indoor domes too. Our weather doesn't permit for play outside all year, really.
Well, that's my next question. Yeah.
But all you need is a pair of shoes, a strap on for rugby, and there you go. Like it's
Yeah. You don't need the even regular American football. You know, that's the same gear as hockey almost. You know, helmet and shoulder pads and everything like that. That gets real expensive.
Our high schools, most high schools used to have football programs, and most of them have got rid of them and they've gone to rugby just because of the pure expense of trying to run a program, right?
Yeah, I can. And you probably use the same field that's already been built, and you know all that. That's pretty cool. That's how she got in. I didn't realize you always connected coming to the conference with going down.
Well, it just so happens it's the same time of year. Like that's the last 2 years it's been like that. She's only 14, so she's been playing for a couple years. But yeah, so every year in Tampa it's called the Magnificent Sevens. So it's a sevens tournament. So sevens is usually this time of years where it's actually quite big in the States, the sevens, where in the summertime it's what they call 15s, where you play full field, and it's what you typically see at the World Cup level, like that's 15. So there's two different types of rugby, but yeah.
Yeah, I never even realized that. I always associate it with Australia, I guess, rugby with Australia, but I've seen more and more, like even on my Instagram feed or something, there'll always be like a rugby or something starting to pop up more on my social media. So that's pretty cool.
If you watch it and you don't know the rules, it looks like utter chaos, but it's actually highly organized. It really is.
When they get in their big piles and they're pushing back and forth.
Yeah.
Man, the leg strength that they have to have in that is amazing.
Yeah.
But that's cool. But speaking of, daughters and sons and stuff, let's get into how usually the very first question I ask is, how did you get into this industry? And I think you were probably born in an ortho lab.
Pretty much.
Probably, yeah.
Yeah, so just before I start, I didn't really get into it with a lot of the members last year or where I came from and stuff. But I was amazed how many people actually did come from, like, they were born into it. Like, or their dad had a lab.
Multi-generational.
So that was my experience also. My parents were born and raised in England. They were post World War II, so I guess you'd call them baby boomers. My dad, they were born in 47 or 48, and he started his apprenticeship at Guy's Hospital in London in the early 60s, and they immigrated in 68, I believe. But at Guy's Hospital, it was an orthodontic clinic. Patients would come to the hospital to receive treatment, as opposed to private practice now. That's kind of how it was. So he was one of the techs in the clinic, working underneath the orthodontists. But it was an apprenticeship program. So when he first started, it was basically like he wasn't sure what he wanted to do for a living, and his parents were like, "All right, you've been doing your paper route long enough." And I believe he worked at a pub as a bartender for a little while. And they said, "You got to go out and find a real work." So he did. And the apprenticeship program doesn't work like a college or a university. The first year of his life, he was schlepping 50-pound bags of stone and cleaning the lab and stuff like that, right?
Right.
And then they just slowly graduate to more and more and more and more. At the end of it, he was one of the top technicians, and he actually worked. You asked me yesterday if he worked for Dr. Adams himself. The guy who invented the Adams clasp. So I was a bit too young for him to actually discuss that, but I looked into it more and more. Dr. Adams apparently invented the clasp in, I believe, 1949.
Oh, wow.
So he started at Guy's Hospital in the early 60s. So if the math is correct, I don't know if he would have learned directly from Dr. Adams, but he would have definitely learned from someone that worked with Dr. Adams.
Right. Okay. A direct in the same hospital or the same clinic where it was probably first implemented, the Adams clasp. So
and he taught me my first Adams clasp. So I like to think I learned from the best.
Yeah, totally. If he learned from the clinic, at least minimal, where it was first implemented, then they know how to do them right. And so they immigrated to where you're at, pretty much where y'all are at right now, in 68.
So back then it was so post World War II, there wasn't a lot in England for them at that age because they were, I would say, early to mid 20s at the time. But there was a lot of opportunity in Canada, and there was a lot of British immigrants to Canada at that time, like lots and lots, because there was lots of opportunity, lots of jobs for them. So he left Guy's Hospital with basically a letter of reference stating what he'd done. They hopped on a boat, packed their suitcases, ended up coming up the St. Lawrence River. I'm not sure how you guys' geography is with Canada, and landed in Montreal. And then Montreal, they took a train to Toronto, which Union Station is similar to, I guess, like the Grand Central Station in New York. It's a big train hub. And they walked out on the streets, Yonge Street, which is one of the main streets in Toronto, with their bags, looked up at the large buildings and like, okay, where do we go from here? But so he already had a letter to go to the UFT, University of Toronto Dental Department. He talked to the head orthodontist there, and he was given a job as a teaching technician. So it wasn't like Guy's Hospital where he was like working on actual patients. He was literally teaching the dentist and the orthodontist the technical side of things. So I don't think they teach that at dental schools anymore. Those positions don't really exist. They always rely on the lab guys to know. But they used to learn how to bend Adams class. They used to learn how to do lingual arches. They like that sort of stuff. So he would teach them that. From there, he worked there for about 4 or 5 years. I came along somewhere in that time. But when the doctors that sort of started with him, when they were starting to graduate as orthodontists and dentists, he saw that as an opportunity to go, well, I know all these guys. They're going to start a private practice soon. So why don't I just get on board with them and see if they want to, if I open a lab, will they come out when they graduate? And that's how he got his start. So that would have been around 74, 75, I believe. I was born in 76. So he had that lab established. Yeah. Oh yeah. There you go. Yeah. So he had that lab established for years before I even thought about getting involved. Because I didn't really start working there until I was about 18 or 19. I sort of would be in and out. He started in his basement, and then they branched out to where they needed like more of a production lab as volume picked up. He took on some employees. One of his first employees was Norm, the one you mentioned earlier.
Yeah, again, the small world thing. Yeah. And I talked to Norm McMillan. He has a lab in Florida right now, and he was from Canada. And somehow we got to talking, and we found out Norm used to work for your parents when Norm got his first start in the industry. Norm actually taught a Adams class at the AOLP before it was ORG. Actually, it was still considered DLAT, just the ortho part of it. He taught an Adams class for us, and I thought that was amazing. That he was like, yeah, I learned from the guy who learned from the guy that invented, the Adams class. So, yeah, definitely small. I should have named this episode "Small World" because it even though
I'd lost touch with that Norm guy. To be honest, when you mentioned his name yesterday, I had to call my mom and say, "Do you remember this Norm?" And then I remember the name being tossed around a bit, but I was too young to remember him being at the lab because, like I said, I was born right around the same time the lab was sort of established, right?
Yeah.
At 2 years old, he might have known my older brother, the one that he actually remembers walking around as a knee-high guy.
Okay. Yeah. Maybe that's the one he's thinking of. I have 2 older
brothers. Yeah. But yeah, it was crazy small world. And his mother, Vi, started a study model business because back then, every case you started, you had to at least startups and finals, right? So there was study models. I know orthodontists that had to build storage rooms above their garage or above their office, and they had it reinforced because of the weight of those things and stuff like that.
Those study models, they have boxes with drawers, and they got little, and they had a whole categorization system. That was.
I don't miss those at all. The trimming of those.
I don't either. They were not money makers unless you specialized in them. Which, if you specialized in them, then maybe you could trim the profit out of that because they took so long. And you
I used
couldn't
to call them
charge.
sort of lost leaders. Like I would say, I'll do your study models if you send me the rest of your volume, that sort of stuff, right?
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
and talk about digital has just
Yeah. Well,
totally got
that's a
rid of that whole
job. That's a
section.
job that doesn't exist anymore, right?
Yeah,
Like I
yeah,
think Matthew back here, he's replaced. Like he does all our like the stone and plaster work and the study models. It just doesn't really. Well, I still accept analog impressions and stone models from some offices because you have to. But I don't know. What's your percentage roughly for analog to digital cases? Gee.
I did my math the other day. I think I'm 70% digital.
Yeah. Okay. I'd be up
That
there, roughly up there too. Yeah.
yeah,
And I love it. It's much cleaner and yeah.
yeah, and infection control. You don't get the well. I rarely got impressions, and
Yeah.
that's one reason I didn't like Crown and Bridge and dentures and stuff because you would get these nasty, bloody impressions, and I was like, well, I don't want to
Yeah.
deal with any
Get
of
away
that.
from those. Yeah.
Yeah, so it's nice to 3D print, and it came with its own issues, its own handful of problems. So it solved some issues 3D printing did, and then added a few more issues like separation and
Yeah.
soldering. You can't solder and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And that's one thing that Norm and I were talking about. He's really on the impression that bending wire on a 3D printed model is so much different than bending wire on a stone because
Visually, it's visually for me
visually,
way different. Yeah. And they're
yeah,
a lot
and
lighter. I find they move around a lot more. I don't
yeah,
necessarily, some people do like to use the model holder contraptions. I don't necessarily do that. So, but yeah, it's a learning curve, it's a learning process.
yeah,
Yeah.
and well,
And
and
then
he
when to
even
print
said the
hollow and when not
friction,
to, and that sort of stuff. Yeah.
the friction of the wire on the stone compared to 3D model, it's different, so it
Yeah.
changes up. Oh, here's
Yeah.
Jeff. He said he polished his first Holly in 1977.
Yeah.
So he's he's
He was
a
working while
veteran
I was
now.
only 1 year old. Same with you, Kate.
Yeah, same here.
Yeah. So
Yeah,
getting back to
solder
like,
on a 3D model, he does not like that. Yeah.
yeah. Oh, yeah, I try and, I have to do it under fume hoods, like big time. I found it funny when I was down at the conference and everyone's like, we duplicate our 3D models now. So I'm like, that process to me just sounds crazy.
Right.
Yeah, I
Well,
solder on the models, but I have a fume hood, like with massive suction. I
yeah.
don't really notice it. Yeah.
Because if you don't have that and you start soldering on a 3D printed model, it's like,
Oh, yeah,
oh, you know,
yeah. It's toxic.
gas.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and that's what Norm was talking about. And I hope I can say this, but he's working on a process to be able to one click print the impression, print the inverse, and you just pour it up in stone.
Right.
So then it goes back to the processes of before 3D printing. It's just you're getting a digital impression that
Yeah.
you print the impression now,
Yeah.
and so
I,
he's
I
working
do
on that
remember one
process.
person do like the whole duplication process, like the whole part of STL files and printing is the accuracy, right? So if
Yeah,
you're duplicating now and introducing stone again, there's the
yeah,
expansion contraction rates. You could basically cause distortion just
right,
on the duplication process. So in my
yeah,
opinion, it was just like, why are we doing that, right? So yeah,
yeah. Because I love the 3D, the scan because it got rid of distortions from taking the impression and then problems of pouring up the impression. It was twofold,
yeah,
and so that got rid of that.
yeah,
But then we're reverting back to because we like our our stone models to work
yeah,
on.
yeah.
But yeah,
That,
uh, so you were talking about your your start in the lab. You said you didn't start till
so
18 or so, and
yeah, so
that's the same thing with my son. I actually showed him how to trim models yesterday on my model trimmer that I still have. Uh,
so at about the age of 17 or 18, I would work there in the summer from time to time. And I liked it. I enjoyed the work. I was always a bit artistic and I liked working with my hands. But my dad was always like, I don't know if you want to be in this business. And blah, blah, blah. I'm like, so I went to university for a year and I came back that summer. And I'm like, I still like the lab, dad. I want to work there. So he took me on. And that's when I decided to go to. So, but like I said earlier, you need your RDT to run a lab.
yeah,
You can't without it. So he said, if you're going to do this, you got to go to school. I'm like, fine, I'll do it. Went to school. And so that's when I went to George Brown College. In my second year of the 4, he was diagnosed with cancer and subsequently passed away within probably about 6 months.
oh
Um,
wow,
yeah. So that was a really tough time because I would only worked part-time in the summer. I really wasn't like an expert yet. Am I able to run a lab? So, and because he actually sat on the CDTO board, the governing board, he was on the CDTO at the time. When he passed away, everyone on the board knew it. So they basically gave us 2 weeks to get a license in there. And that was stressful because, in the wrong situation, you get an RDT in there with the wrong reasons. And it's our lab. Things
Right.
can go sideways, right? So we interviewed a few people. Some of them weren't the nicest, but we ended up finding this semi-retired denture RDT. And he'd never really worked in an ortho lab, but all you need is an RDT, right?
Right.
So he came on board and said, "This is great. I'll work with you guys." Super nice guy. We ended up teaching him quite a bit of ortho, but he also brought a lot of denture skills to the lab. Like we started making partials, like flippers, kids that were congenitally missing laterals. And we'd always do that, but he taught us some really cool techniques on how to make it look
I bet
better,
so.
that sort of stuff. So it worked out really, really well. And we were lucky because that could have been really bad for us. And my dad at the point was sort of getting to the stage where, some techs like to say, "Well, I'm going to get away from the bench. It's time for me to get away from the bench." And he was getting to that stage. So the employees at the time, they knew what they were doing, which really helped because I had to stay at school. I would come in on weekends and summers, but I had to finish to get my license, right? So the pressure was on a bit. In a few years, I did get my license, and then I was thrust into being the supervisor at the age of like 23 or something like that. And subsequently, even though he didn't need to, my license was running the lab at that point. He stayed on. His name was John. He's a great guy because he enjoyed working. Like, again, he worked 3 days a week, and that's what he wanted to do. But yeah, he was a lifesaver for us, really. Like, because it really could have gone like totally opposite direction. Like,
Yeah,
if you get the wrong person in there.
Those technicians that are semi-retired, like you said, a real lifesaver for other labs. They just like, listen, I just want a 9 to 5 job. I want to come in. I want to wax or bend wire. I don't want any drama. Just let me do my work, and that's all I want to do. And listen to my music and podcast or radio. Yeah, I've worked with a few of those guys and ladies that are in the same boat. So good thing y'all came because in Texas the same thing. You have to have a CDT on staff. Doesn't have to be the owner, but they have to be on staff 30 hours a week. So that means most owners become CDT.
Yep.
So that is
and then at the age of 23, being thrust into that because they're basically all the clients at that time were obviously my dad's clients, and they were roughly his age. Like he was 51 when he passed away, so most of his clients are still going to be practicing for a while.
He was young.
Yeah.
It's
cancer,
I'm sorry
right?
about that. It really kicked you in the pants to get going or continue down that path.
Yeah. So I was always very nervous talking to them on the phones at first, but for the most part, they were always very professional and nice. I learned so much from them. Now, subsequently, the clients are all now people I've met and known through my career because it's been, I think it was 1998 or 99 when he passed away. So it's been quite some time. So
your website. So did he have a website?
Nope.
At the time, or is that something you had to implement just to be in the new
in
industry?
98, before he passed away, printing wasn't a thing. Everything was done analog. I remember about 10 years prior to that, we didn't even have computers in the lab. We were I wasn't because I wasn't really part of it, but they were handwriting all the invoices.
Yeah.
So implemented the first computer. I can't remember. It was old dot matrix printer. We got some software. Yeah. And then I got into the digital part of it. If you look at the top of my screen there, the 3D digital models. I decided to invest in some desktop scanner, and instead of trimming those big study models, I started archiving them from the doctors. That's how I got into digital at the start. And then and they loved it, right? Because they knew they had an STL file if they needed it, but they didn't necessarily have the big stone models, right? So that worked out well for a while. And then that slowly got me into when the first printers came out. I already had the software and I already knew sort of what I was doing digitally. My first printer was a Stratasys printer. The build plate was probably not much bigger than my Asiga build plates are, but the machine itself was about the size of a stove. And it was really
Oh
slow.
yes,
It took about 8 hours of print. We used to
and it
do them
wasn't like
overnight. Yeah.
resin. It was
It
it
would
printed like a
pass like
dot
this.
matrix.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. It print with support material. So then you had to have a cleaning machine to spray
Yep.
off all the support material
Yeah,
and
yeah.
stuff.
And
Uh,
then the heads would have to be changed all the time, and they weren't
yeah,
cheap.
oh,
You'd set your
yeah,
printer to print overnight because it's about 8 hours. You'd come in the next morning, there was a misprint. You'd be like, oh,
uh,
kidding me right now? But yeah, but
yeah.
it got me in the industry of printing. Or yeah, and then so we now we use a Sega. I do like them a lot. They're very accurate and they're fast.
I've
Um,
heard good things. That was Whipmix, right? I don't know if Whipmix makes them anymore. Do they?
I don't.
Is it?
Whitmix might
Is
have
it?
carried them. S
Oh,
and
they
F.
carried them. That's
Yeah,
right.
they were
Yeah.
probably a distributor for you guys in the States. My distributor is called Swiss and F Metals. It's a Frescident uh, uh, distributorship in Canada. That's who I got the mic
Oh,
from. But I think their head office is Australia, I believe.
oh, gotcha. Yeah. The uh, I've heard really good thing, but it's amazing because I was watching this, and of course I was a lab manager at the same time, and we were kind of watching this 3D printing coming in all the large labs,
Mhm.
in the states, Neo and ODL, and they all bought that Stratasys printer, and we were like, oh, that's so cool, and then they would come to these conferences and go, yeah, but it's a lot, like you said, misprint after 8 hours, and you got to start it over again, and
Yeah.
it's a cool technology. But then I started my own lab and rebooted my lab. I had these doctors that followed me to the labs I worked for,
Yeah.
and I restarted up my lab in 2018. And toward the end of 2018, I got a call from one of my biggest accounts, and he goes, "Hey, I bought a scanner. Can you accept scans now?" I'm like, "No, I don't have a printer." So then I had to buy a Formlabs real quick, and by that time, luckily they were 3,500,
Yeah.
and a lot of ortho labs had them.
Yeah. The Form Labs,
So
they work fairly similar to the Asiga. They actually look very similar too.
yeah, I
Yeah.
thought so too. I thought they looked real similar. I don't know if you. I got the
Yeah.
two twos and a three,
Yeah.
and I haven't gotten into. So you started out early in 3D printing, and in I can't remember if we talked about this before the live stream started, but you said you're mainly doing models, but now you're doing more stuff with the 3D printers and things like that, right?
Yeah. Well, mostly models. Um,
That's ortho, really. It's just
yeah.
models.
Yeah.
We talked about dentures and denture labs doing
Yeah.
3D printed
When
dentures
when
now.
I when I went on about more printing, I'm sending it out, but it's the sintered bands,
Mm,
which is something I knew about prior to coming down 2 years ago to the conference, but I didn't realize how mainstream they were becoming in the States. So I came back to Ontario, and I'm like, I got to figure out a way to implement this into to to my area. So I did it, but you're looking into those laser center printers that are super expensive. So
yeah.
what I did at first was, because of my crown and bridge background, we design and print them in a composite, then we would cast them. So I was casting them at first,
Oh
instead of
my
having to print it.
gosh.
Yeah, and it worked really, really well. I know it's a little more labor intensive, but it got me in the door with my doctors because they all sort of knew about it, but they didn't necessarily want to ship to the US because what was, I do know one of them in particular was sending cases to that's some of them right there.
Were these 3D printed or cast?
Those ones are printed. Those are not the cast ones. Those ones are
Oh,
printed.
okay.
So I'll tell you how the evolution of that. So I started casting it, and my doctors liked it, obviously.
Yeah.
But the expense of those printers was crazy, and some of the doctors were actually already sending cases to the States. Do you know Motor City?
Yes.
Yeah,
Uh,
and I believe Anyway, they were sending 5-6 cases at a time, so they'd have to wait and send 6 cases because of the shipping costs. Like,
right.
even though it's like, I believe Motor City's Detroit, not far from me, it's still about $50 in shipping alone. So when you topple that, like one case plus $50 shipping, it doesn't make any sense financially, right?
Right.
So I slowly got some people on board to start sending them to me as casting. And then a company that does a lot of 3D printing, industrial 3D printing near me, ended up buying one of and they have a dental department, so they bought a 3D a laser sintered printer. So I started outsourcing to them, and so to this day still, that's who I outsource to them. They're close
Oh,
enough
that's
that I
nice. It's
just pick it
local.
up. Yeah.
Oh,
So eventually I want
it's
to get
that
into
close?
that
You can just pick it
technology.
up.
Yeah. Yeah. I send my courier driver and she picks it up.
Oh, and oh man, that's so much nicer.
Yeah.
But
So we
what
do all our design and everything in house. I just send them out. Those are just some
that's
surgical arch wires that I had printed. That's actually quite recent. Yeah.
yeah.
And Matthew,
Uh,
the guy I introduced you to, he's the one that does all that design. He's waving right now. Yeah.
Say
Yeah.
hi, Matthew.
Yeah.
You're on the screen now.
Yeah. So the neat thing about Matthew is he doesn't have a dental background. He went to school for computer animation. He's
Oh
a
my,
gamer. He likes his video
yeah,
games, but
that's my
it
son.
translates really, really well to the dental aspect, right? So yeah.
Yeah. So
So I had to
yeah,
teach him dental, but he teaches me a lot on the computer that I just don't know about. Yeah.
Maybe I'll
well,
go
and
to college.
Yeah.
Next.
and I went to uh, uh, like I would have my son. I'm teaching him, okay, reset this tooth, and then come get me, and let me approve it. And he goes, "Dad, can I do it in Blender? Because that's what I use for my 3D
That's what we
animation."
use, Blender. Yeah.
Yeah, and I go, use whatever you want as long as it gives me the result I want. And so he gets in there and he does the Blender because my son does he makes his own VR chat models.
Yeah.
Where he creates his own model 3D rendering whatever, and then he can wear it in VR chat. And so this was, like you said, teaching someone like that to do the digital stuff like this is a no-brainer.
Yeah. Yeah, we're also printing night guards now. I should have mentioned that earlier. We do a lot of thermoplastic night guards. We design and print. Blender has a nice module how to design the night guards too. I'm not sure if everyone's aware of that. Blender's something to look at. Blender Dental. It's a little more labor intensive. It doesn't have necessarily all the AI some of the other
right
stuff does now, but I mean it's very cost effective. I think a module for Blender is like $30. Like it really works well. Yeah.
Well, I'm gonna look into that because if my son knows, in fact, I think he had to install it on this computer in the lab.
Yeah.
And I was like, I don't care if you feel comfortable with that software and it produces the same result, man, do that. And yeah, because I want to get into my form does night guards also. I just gotta buy that daggum expensive resin first. But if y'all are wondering, this is Ferarro Dental Lab. That's Drew's Instagram. If y'all want to follow him on that, and he was saying he's very active on there, posting all of his stuff, all the cool stuff that comes in. So that's neat. Oh, we got some. Go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted, if you scroll back up slightly, if you're looking at that Thomas Pinlast RPE there, right there, that's something that I picked up, I think the first time I came down to the conference.
Yes.
Then I went to the Dentarum reps around here. Now they refer orthodontists to me because I've been making them. So I get referrals directly from the Dentarum guys, based on what I learned down at the conference. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's one of the best things is we call it the pearl. When you come to the conference, there's always one thing you pick up that you can immediately implement in the lab. And that's a huge one if you're getting referrals because of something you learned at the conference.
Yeah.
And we are actually doing something I'm kind of interested in is this Mara. That I want to do that. And then I think Brandon Farley, there's a TAD expander fabrication.
Mm-hmm.
I'm trying to look at, there's another one that he's doing. Is it the Mara? It was another one.
I'm doing a lot more TAD supported appliances now, which I find, and what I find with the printing is great because they place the TADs and that we can print them. If you go back, you might be able to show you one where I do my own eyelets.
Oh yeah. Like saw that
right
here.
there. Yeah. So the TADs are being placed there.
Oh, I
They
see the
scan,
TADs. Yeah.
they scan and send me. I make my eyelets around the TADs. And then what they do is they just fill it with a composite. They cement directly to it. So there's
Oh,
no TAD. I don't know if you remember the old Unitech system. There was an actual cap that fit over top of the analog, and then we
yeah.
weld to the analog. This is sort of what we come up with now, because the Unitech ones in Canada anyway, it got discontinued, that system. So a lot of them are going this eyelet route.
That's that makes it a lot, because I know that at one point, and maybe that's what you're kind of talking about, is
Yeah,
it had to be exact. You know,
yeah.
the this doesn't look like it has to be exact because the composite will fill in the
It fills in
blanks
the
or
rest of
the
the holes there. Yeah, yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, that's cool. I didn't think about. And then you laser weld your eyelets so that they're
Yep,
reinforced. And that
yep,
looks like you did that there too.
yep.
On there, that
Yeah,
those look nice.
some of them called using the arms off the front of the screw, but sometimes you just don't have the room. So that in that case, I laser welded right to the screw and made my own arms. I've cut the arms
That
off that screw there, right? So yeah,
yeah, that wow, that's amazing. Um, let's see. Oh, we got some questions in. We're coming up on an hour, and I know you're doing this during your lunch break, and I appreciate that.
yeah,
But you know, you get us ortho lab techs talking, and especially comparing stories of different countries. You know, I really enjoyed it. But um, he this uh, DFCJ Junior said, "Same Jeff. I started because a buddy landed a job pumicing. He got me in. I've been knocking out appliances for 23 years now.
nice.
That's pretty cool how you got." And I actually did a video on my YouTube channel. How did you get into the ortho lab? And I came up with 5 paths. And one was friend or family got you in.
Yep,
And so, and then one was like military. One was me. I was an ortho assistant turned lab tech turned lab owner.
yeah.
So,
My son's
aim.
working in the lab now with us.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
How many you
If he
got?
gets he's 21. If he gets back here from his lunch break when we're still on, I'll introduce him to you. But
When does he start
he
coming to the conference with you?
that's a good idea. When he can, when I'm out of the lab, he's got to be here. So we'll see.
Oh, that's true.
But I
Yeah,
only miss
yeah,
one day of work, so it's still the Friday, right? So,
yeah.
but
Friday,
I'm off for
Saturday.
the week that week, because I'll be in Tampa, so he won't be able to come for all of that. But he's
Yeah.
a big rugby player himself. He played for Ontario, and yeah, I guess rugby
That's
because it's kind
cool.
of popular in my family.
Yeah, I did not realize rugby was that big in
Yeah,
Canada.
yeah.
But Amy said this might be a little off subject, but I've seen several YouTube channels of orthodontists now using 3D printing for brackets. Whoa! Instead of using traditional metal or ceramic bracket. I
Yeah,
didn't know
so
this.
I've heard about that. So you can now design custom brackets as opposed to just getting them off the shelf. Apparently, you can pick your own like angulation and everything you want, and then print them. So you design them and print them. So
That's
that's kind of not in our hands. The brackets never really been in our hands, so that
right.
doesn't really bother me too much. But yeah, apparently that technology is available. Yeah,
Wow. And I guess all the major bracket players are going to get into that
yeah, for sure.
and order your brackets, and they come in almost like a indirect bonding. You know, they
Yeah,
would send to us and we'd place the brackets and send them back. I could see that all being encompassed into, you know, hey lab, hey Drew, make print 3D print my brackets and then put them in an indirect bonding and then send them to me
yeah.
and get that. And then another question: do ortholabs print those out for orthodontists because they're custom made for you? That you just answered that. Yeah, it sounds like it's not going to be the ortholabs that do that.
Yeah. Like I said, when I first heard that, I'm like, wow. But then I'm like, I've never really been in the bracket business anyway. So
Yeah,
sure, they send the brackets to me and we'll put them in the trays for them. But the bracket, like, yeah, some of the technology is a bit scary, but you know that one didn't bother me.
that. Oh
Yeah,
wow, that. Yeah, that didn't. Well, like you said, Norm. You know, his mother had 3D printing department. You know, and uh, there are some labs that totally started in the models, the plaster models, and that industry has just died. You know,
yeah,
it's gone unless you went digital like you did. You bought a scanner and just transitioned with the flow. It, you know, we're coming up on an hour. Uh, let's talk about the future for your lab. You know, what do you see coming around? What are you interested in as far as ortho lab that you curious about learning more?
Um, I want to get. I have a. I do a lot of clear aligners, but it's right now it's kind of in its infancy. Like I do a lot of anterior correction. So sometimes you get like these ortho relapses back, and they work great for that. But most of my aligners are basically between like 3 to 5 to 6. I don't take on really complicated cases. I
Right.
would to look into more and more of that because they're becoming more and more popular, obviously, and there's lots of other um, options out on the market. As far as and then other than that, I'm not
Yeah.
automa the AI and the automation of everything now. You mentioned that's going to be a smaller lab to invest in all that technologies. A little tough, but I know it's coming down the road. So I'm definitely going to keep an eye on that. AI
Yeah.
is a big one with the software and everything like that. So
That's
definitely
what
going to be watching
Christian
for that.
Sauerman is going to be speaking on. He's
Yeah,
from New England Ortho Lab. He's going to be
yeah,
automating your lab.
yeah.
That's huge for small labs.
Yeah, because like the little things like they're really pushing those wire bending machines now, right? So all you need is a guy like Matthew,
Yeah.
and the machine does it for you, right? As opposed to trying to train a new tech. So that's where I know the future's going. So and I know usually over time technology tends to come down in price anyway. Like I'm a
Right.
7 lab, we're not huge, but we're also not tiny, right?
Right.
So yeah, that's the way we're going to go. It's your labor basically, and
Yeah.
who you're going to employ. You're going to be employing um, CAD designers and computer animators as opposed to like guys that are going to sit and bend wire and sprinkle your
Yeah.
acrylic and all that sort of stuff.
Well, and I thought about the whole wire bending machine too, and I thought, you know what? If I do that, my son does the designing. I kind of want him. I want to do a study where he designs in 3D metal prints, not print, bends
Yeah,
100 labial bows, but he has to also hand bend 100 labial bows. And I kind of want to see, you know, at the end, if I get two of these, which one would I choose on the
right.
100th labial bow, the
I do
machine
remember.
or
I remember Michael right at the the conference, when he was talking about that. He goes because his employees would design it and print it. Or sorry, the machine would bend it for him, but then they were
yeah,
still taking it, putting it on the model, and adjusting and fixing it, and blah 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 blah. So, like, at what point? I haven't seen how accurate it is. Is there still a lot of adjusting to be done after the fact? So I don't know
right.
that, to be
Last
honest.
time I heard it was like 80. It's about 80 or 90% there, and you need a
Okay.
technician that knows what they're doing to tighten it up the last 10% is what I heard last time. So,
Yeah.
and
Okay.
I contacted AOS, the wire bending, and I said, hey, are you coming to the conference? They go, no, we're not going this year. I'm like, you're missing out.
Mhm.
Largest ortho lab conference in the country until I'm been proven wrong.
Mhm.
So uh, let's we'll go ahead and end it there. I know you're on your
Sure.
lunch break, and we both have cases to get out the door today. Drew, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. And
Yeah, it's been fun. It's actually my
yeah,
first podcast. I should have mentioned that to everybody. I do Zoom meetings and things, but I've never been on a live podcast before. So, I
yeah,
thanks for having me. It's been great. If anyone's like fence sitters out there that are listening and haven't been down to the conference, I would recommend going to it. It's fun. I know they stream it live, but it's not the same. You should go down and meet everybody.
oh,
Everyone's
good
super
point. We're
friendly.
not we're not live streaming this year.
Oh, you're not? Okay. Yeah.
No, we are recording.
Right.
So, but we have three classrooms going on at one time. So we're going to be recording one classroom. So if you end up can't decide between two classes, go to the one that's not being recorded, and then you can watch the recording later.
Yeah.
So we're not live streaming, but we will make the recordings available
Yeah.
a week or two later.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. I'm gonna
so
have to get brushed
definitely,
up on my cornhole again.
yeah,
I don't-
yeah, yeah. We have cornhole and drinks on Friday night, and that's a lot of fun, and it's it's just fun to hang out with other lab owners, just like we're
yeah.
doing here.
And they just
Um,
everyone talks and no one's competitive. You share ideas. It's a really nice atmosphere. So yeah, it's
it's
great.
it's how I get to meet people like you and
Hmm.
other lab owners from across the country, and we all have the same problems. And it's
Yep.
amazing to go, oh, I'm having that same problem too.
Yep.
And then some people have figured out how to fix it, and they got different ideas, and we share. So yeah, I'm glad you brought that up.
Yep.
So check out that link. I'll try to put it in the comments below, and that way everyone. Actually, I'll do that right now as we end here, and let me copy and paste. And so anyway, thanks. Drew, stay on board. We got to let this thing upload after I end it. And for all those that are watching, I'll see y'all maybe next week. I'm on a streak now with these. So we'll see who I'm interviewing next week. And until then, I'll see y'all and have a good rest of the week.